You're listening to the Culture Junkie Podcast, where we go beyond the surface of pop culture.
I'm Keith.
And I'm Xandra. Together, we dive into the craft process and passion that drive today's creators. This is the Culture Junkie Podcast.
Hey guys, here we are with Darius Domingues, best known for his sharp analysis, commentary on Toronto Maple Leafs, does a lot of work with Leafs Digest and the Maple Leafs aggregator. I know him as a hard rock, solid if not spectacular defenseman with the High Park Lions. But here we are today, and I want to ask Darius stuff about his career. But first of all, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today, Keith. And I try to be the best defenseman, but better forward.
Listen,
trying my hand at deep.
You're versatile. You're a versatile guy. Hey, I'm always surprised when people can go from forward to defenseman in the same game. I can't even go from the offensive zone to the defensive zone in the same games. You know, it's something that I admire. So listen, I know you do a lot of great stuff online, Leafs Digest. You know, you have a great deal of experience talking about hockey and playing hockey. You like hockey. How did you get into this field? How did you get into the whole creator space?
Yeah, so obviously now, doing work with Leafs Digest Media, I talk about mostly hockey. Hockey is my bread and butter, I guess, right? I enjoy other sports, but I know the most about hockey. But, always played sports growing up. My parents put me in hockey at a pretty young age. So I was going through that, like most Canadian kids, I think, started in hockey or maybe basketball, right? So I was going through that. And then, at the same time, when I was a kid, my mom had those old, like, big camcorders that you would put on your shoulder, back in the, late 90s, early 2000s. So since I was like 5 or 6, I was doing that, awesome. Right? So, just, my own talk show, I would have like my toys on as guests and stuff like that. So I don't know where it started from, but I was already doing that type of stuff and wanted to get into like content production from a young age. And then even through, going through elementary school and into high school, I was making short films, like original short films with my cousins during the summers when we were off school. So always just being creative and watching interviews and stuff. Like a lot of my friends weren't really into that stuff. And I was like, this is great. I'm watching like interviews of how actors like to do certain things and how directors are doing stuff. So I was always kind of into that mixed with sports growing up. So always playing hockey. And then, as you get into your late teen years, you start to realize, like most people, I'm not going to make it. So I got to do something else with my time, maybe. So pulled away from.
I've heard somebody say that.
Exactly. You start to, I think it's around 16 or 17. I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, where you're like, okay, I'm definitely, not going to make it here to the, to play pro or anything like that. So pull away from that a little bit. And then I went straight into live broadcasting. I started volunteering for Rogers TV, which was local at the time. They kind of got rid of that, a couple of years ago. I think at this point, everything's pretty much digital at this point, but volunteering there, going through high school. And then it kind of just took off from there. I was like, I absolutely love this. It's the best of both worlds. I was doing broadcasting in sports. I love sports. I love the broadcasting. I love media, all of that stuff. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And then worked my way up eventually now to working at Digest Media and doing YouTube content creation and talking about my favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, for a living, which has been a thrill.
Awesome. That's great. So I guess you bypassed the traditional go to broadcasting school, kind of Humber College kind of thing?
Well, it's funny you bring up Humber College, actually, because I did end up going to Humber College for broadcasting. I did a 2-year program there in 2017 to 2019, which was a great experience. And you meet a lot of people, you get a lot of, hands-on experience and stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff that I was doing there, I was already doing on my own. I just learned how to do it professionally, I guess, and how to, build those connections and whatnot. So I wouldn't say I bypassed it. I still went there, got that experience and, went through schooling, but I was already doing a lot of that like before when I was around maybe 14 to 16 years old. I was already diving into that. I was meeting people like Roger Lajoie and meeting him, working with him. And he was on Sportsnet, which was pretty cool. I'm there as a 16-year-old kid. I'm like, what is even going on right now? So that was pretty cool. But I wouldn't say I bypassed it. Still went through all of that, but I was doing it from a younger age.
Right. So did you ever want to think about being behind the camera or being on, just actually creating the stuff, but not necessarily being a personality? Was that ever a choice?
Definitely. I think around like my early 20s, I was like, maybe I want to pull away from this because it wasn't necessarily working at the time. Like I always loved being in front of the camera and doing that, but it wasn't working. So I was like, how can I find a different avenue to, maybe be behind the camera and maybe make some money as well? Because obviously that's something,
yeah, right.
You got to figure that part out, right? So, went more behind the camera. I was doing more real estate content creation, like totally like not my face whatsoever, completely 180. I was doing real estate stuff like construction before and afters, automotive advertising, stuff like that, where you go and you film different things. And that was cool, but it didn't really speak to me like being in front of the camera and analyzing and talking about hockey or sports, right? It always came back to that. So I did get out of it a little bit for a couple of years where I was like, maybe I'll explore this, because I did like doing, photography and all of that stuff as well. But I did go back to what I originally wanted to do, which is what I'm doing now in front of the camera, breaking down, film, whatever it is, the breaking news in sports. So did dabble with that for a little bit, but ultimately I like being in front of the camera better, I think.
Makes sense. You're great in front of the camera. What other sports did you play growing up?
I played soccer, which went pretty interesting. Funny story about that, actually, that we can get into. So,
Sure.
Didn't play soccer, growing up. Started with hockey. It was only hockey. And then we're like, okay, maybe let's dabble with some other sports. My parents were like, let's put you in soccer. But it was actually funny because my whole hockey team signed up for soccer. So it was the same team from hockey, but we just joined a soccer league. So it was the exact same team. And then we won the championship that year, that first year. And then, yes, in soccer, which we were winning, we were doing well in hockey, but we all came together in soccer, completely different sport, won the championship there. And then I think everyone decided, been there, done that. And we all quit. Like we never went back to soccer after that 1 year. Wow. So it was pretty crazy. I played soccer growing up, and Portuguese background, so ultimately you have to do it at some point. So
no choice.
No choice, right? You're kind of forced into it one way or another. But played it in school as well, but nothing outside of that really. Like obviously you play with your friends. When you're growing up, you play baseball and all the rest of those, football in the schoolyard. But organized sports, it was soccer and hockey for me.
Yeah, it seems to be the Canadian thing. You play soccer and hockey. Until you can get that to that level where you can't play competitively anymore, and then you decide what are you going to pick up, or are you going to continue recreationally or whatever. So so you don't play soccer at all anymore, eh?
No, I mean, like for fun with my cousins.
Just kick it around everyone.
Just kick it around, stay active, right? I think we all have to stay active as we get older too. So just like that, but nothing competitive or anything like that. No.
So listen, Leafs Digest, that's where listen, it's funny. We're on the same hockey team, and I'm watching this guy on Leafs Digest, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together for 3 months. I go, hey, wait a minute, that's the same guy. Anyway, but how did you first come to meet Nick and get tied up in that thing?
Yeah, pretty interesting story actually. So I was just looking on LinkedIn and LinkedIn jobs, right? Just to see, what was going on, like most people do, right? Found that posting, and we as a company right now, obviously I'm doing some recruitment for them right now. Digest Media, I'm full time doing that as well. So, just see a posting out there for a Leafs channel, and I was like, hey, that fits exactly with what I want to do. That would be really cool for that experience. Clearly, they have some strategy behind it as well, so that'd be good. A great experience to do what I want to do and also learn how to get better at it, right? So applied for it. I wrote a cover letter. Like I wanted it so bad. I was like, I really want this role. So ended up getting hired for it. And it was a, really small thing when it started. I think it was, when I was hired on, it was around 2,000 subscribers, and it grew to that point pretty quickly. Like it was a small thing. But then when I joined, it was a bit of a slow burn. So, like you mentioned, meeting you and playing on the same hockey team. At first, it was kind of like I didn't really mention anything because it was a small kind of podcast YouTube thing. But then it grew over the course of a year to now, 23,000 subscribers. It's a massive thing. I am getting recognized sometimes when I go play hockey, or one time at a grocery store, and I was like, this is a little bit weird. Nothing crazy, right? But
one time in the produce section at a grocery store.
Exactly, right? So it's nothing crazy, but it has gotten to a point where people are like, I do recognize your voice. I do watch your show pretty regularly, right? So it's gotten to the point where we haven't even missed a daily upload since March of 2023. It's pretty crazy. Awesome. So we've been super consistent. I think people are starting to come to us more so over the course of the last 6 months for their daily Leafs news, everything that's happening with the team. So it's been awesome. Like it's exactly what I want to do. I've always stayed on top of what the Leafs are doing since I was in elementary school at this point, like the day-to-day moves and stuff like that. So it's grown to a point that has been awesome. You can connect with your audience as well. You share moments with the audience, the people who are watching with you as well. Like, oh, I remember that moment. That was awesome. I wish this Leafs team was more like that, stuff like that. So It's been really cool. So The biggest thing to me is, of course, you want to see the numbers go up and all of that stuff. That's all great. But
Sure.
the connection with the people watching has been like
Mhm.
the best thing, because they can connect with what you're talking about day to day. So that's been a lot of fun.
So, that's an interesting point. Here we are in non-traditional media,
Hmm.
and you say you do have the opportunity to interact. You do have the engagement with your quote unquote fans or your followers or adherents, whatever you want to call them. What do you think that means for sports, for the digital age sports now? I like to say that we're in the digital age. Do you think
Hmm.
this is something that's going to become more pervasive, or will this kind of thing that we're doing here remain just kind of niche?
No, I think it's going to grow to a point. How much things have changed in the last 5 years since 2020 is insane, right? If you think about it, there's hardly any talk shows left. You're always going to have your traditional, intermission reports and stuff like that in terms of sports. That is going to happen. But I think things are changing very rapidly. And I think, like you mentioned, something like this will no longer be niche. It just depends on, if you have that audience. So I think it's changing very rapidly. It's going to change very quickly over the course of the next 5 to 10 years as well. And people want something different. As the floodgates have kind of opened here, and since, the pandemic in 2020, people are starting to look elsewhere for, certain content or analysis, and they know that it's out there now. So they're going to continue to look. And when they do find something that they like, they're going to continue to watch it. So these different platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, they're all hosting these things, but I don't think it's going to go away. And I do think that it is going to, overtake traditional, whatever that is. Traditional media is going to change, right? It's going to kind of stay the same in certain aspects, but it is going to change and be more, like the digital age. But even ESPN, for example, they're changing. They're going fully digital as well. So they understand it, but it's been a slow burn for them as well. But no, I think things are changing very rapidly. And I think, there is something for everyone out there right now, which is very cool as well. Right. So
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah.
I think that's the cool thing, that there is something for everyone, but I do find it interesting that everyone is so positive because when my friends and I, this is what gave me, us the idea to start our Culture Junkie podcast. We want to talk to
Mhm.
people about stuff that we would talk to them about anyway. And when my friends and I get together, we're just like, oh, they're like killing these guys. It's like everything's terrible. But when I watch the peripheral media around teams that I'm interested in, sports that I'm interested in, or
Mhm.
teams that I don't like. For instance, I watch, I'll give him a shout out. I watch Sneaky Joe DiBiase on the Locked On Sabres podcast every time, every chance I get, because Buffalo, I can't stand the Buffalo Sabres. And I want to know what's going on, right? And I kind of have a little bit of Schadenfreude watching them suffer or not making the playoffs for the last 200 years or whatever it is. But the thing about it is everyone is still so positive.
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of the fan that comes out in
Yes.
people, as opposed to being objective. Like, I think I'm objective. So tell me, how
Mhm.
do you balance your fan emotion with objective analysis? How do you manage that? How do you
Yeah.
navigate those waters?
Well, I try to be personally very logical with my analysis and what's actually happening, because I want to inform the viewer, because we're all fans, but a lot of people don't watch as closely as maybe I do to the day-to-day things, right? So I want to inform them with what's actually happening first and foremost. But there are times where my opinion will come through and I feel a certain way about certain players, or especially if they're in the playoffs, right? It usually ends the same way. So I'm going to get emotional about that when it happens, right? At least talking about the
Right.
Leafs, right? So, but one thing I try to do, and you brought it up there a little bit too, is, there's so much, especially with the Leafs, and I feel like in other, content sources or whatever, the negativity thing, right? And when a lot of the traditional media is talking about the Leafs, they know that there's a lot of people, maybe even more people than Leafs fans, that are watching that hate the Leafs. So they're going to feed into that a little bit. But people who are watching our channel, for the most part, are Leafs fans. So I'm going to keep it positive. I'm going to keep it logical, inform you with what's happening, and keep it light, keep it happy, because, we're Leafs fans and we want to see them succeed, right? There are times you got to dip into the negative stuff if something, you can't be tone deaf, and, if something
This
bad
is
does
it.
happen, you got to dip into that, of course, right? But I like to keep it optimistic. And I also find it funny that if somebody who isn't a Leafs fan, let's say, is watching our content and we're super positive about it, and we're like, this is a great thing, because it might actually be, it's maybe
Absolutely.
making them a little upset, right? And I do take
Sure.
some joy in that a little bit, because they can get the other side of things, probably most other places. Like, we've all seen the TikToks and, the other content out there on YouTube. So just for the Leafs specifically, that's what I try to do. But I take pride in giving logical analysis in terms of like, this is what they're doing, here's why, and then I'll give you my opinion on how I think it's going to work out and get into the fan side of things. But I want to keep people up to date with what's actually happening rather than, a TikTok you might see where somebody's just like, this is how I feel about the Leafs.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great way to play it. It's not necessarily right down the middle, but people
Mhm.
understand where you're coming from, and they can get their information with a side of opinion as opposed to
Right.
opinion with a side of information, right? It's really pretty cool. I find myself getting my information about, watching highlights and getting feedback and finding out how things are going more so online on YouTube, but a little bit on TikTok, a little bit on Instagram once in a while, but mostly through platforms like your own, like,
Mhm.
Leafs Digest, other things around that. I know you do another team. Is the Rangers or the Blues?
I do a few. I do the Rangers. I do the Blues. I was dabbling with the Penguins for a little
See,
while. I do an
you look at
all
me
NHL
keeping up with
channel.
your career, eh?
That's right. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So then tell me, what's the most surprising Leafs moment that you've covered?
There's been a couple. Today, David Camp got so today is an interesting one. I wouldn't say it's maybe the most surprising because with the Leafs, almost nothing is ever surprising with the Leafs, which is funny
Right.
because there's just always something out there about it. So nothing ever really catches me too off guard. But even today, there was a shocking moment where somebody got hurt. Scott Lawton got hurt. He's put on IR. He's going to miss the
Oh,
next couple of weeks. It's a devastating thing. And then they're talking about David Kampf is going to come back into the lineup. He's skating with the team. He's on a line. And then an hour later, they put him on waivers. He's gone. Right. So I thought that was. I thought that was shocking. I was like, that, hour to hour changed very drastically. I don't know what the conversation was there. So those are the only things that really catch me off guard with the Leafs. I wish I had a better answer, but even with, Mitch Marner leaving, it was so drawn out where it's like,
yeah.
just get this over and
But we
done with.
talked about that in the spring, before the playoffs even started. But it's funny you said you want to talk about fan stuff. Lawton was looking half decent you know,
Yeah.
in uh, in preseason, and now he's come up lame. It's funny you say that. There's just so many things that are surprising that happen. I like to say lower down the lineup at not at the superstar level. There's more intrigue, I think, down the third and fourth line guys and
Yes.
taxi squad kind of guys that are moving around. That's probably where I think your kind of insight really helps the
Mhm.
casual fan understand what's going on with the sport. Do you get any kind of feedback about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that we take pride in as well because there's so much content out there that is Austin Matthews, will he score 50 goals or won't he? Right. And there's a conversation to be had there for sure. But the day-to-day stuff and what Leaf fans are actually interested in, I think we have an idea of what Austin Matthews is going to do this year, right? Or at
Mhm.
least what you're hoping. So a lot of people might create content like that, or, who's the better center, Sidney Crosby or Austin Matthews? There's a time and a place for that stuff. But
Right.
what we take pride in is like this is what's happening with the Leafs right now. And they have to figure out what's going on with the third and fourth line because that's going to seriously impact how they find success this year. And if they are going to find success in the playoffs ever with Mitch Marner leaving because it is a deeper team, right? So if this guy's playing well, what does that mean for the lineup moving forward? Is he going to make the team? If they send this guy down, how does that affect the salary cap? Can they then go out and make another move to add to the top six if they want to at the trade deadline? That's really what we're trying to get into day to day and what we're talking about because you have to start thinking towards the future and what, moves this team is actually making and how it impacts their play on the ice because ultimately Leaf fans want to see a Stanley Cup. I think not is Austin Matthews going to do this or that. We have an idea and,
Right.
where he probably is going to do it. Right. So we'll just have to find out and see. But that's what we really take pride in the day-to-day stuff kind of, they made this move. Here's the implications it has on the team. And I think that, people really find a lot of value in that clearly because we do have a lot of viewers and, get a lot of feedback in that way. And a lot of the comments are very positive and people are into it, having conversations every day. So that's been a lot of fun because there's a time and a place for the other conversations and those fun, like what if stuff. But
For
I like
sure.
to get into the actual analysis of stuff.
Yeah. Well, listen, you mentioned Mitch Marner. Like, I mean, I'm a big Mitch Marner fan because I'm a talent fan. I played a lot of team sports. I even played sports for money. So I
Right.
understand, team dynamics and stuff like that. But I've never understood the Toronto fan affinity for like heart and soul guys. Like,
Hmm.
I'll never forget that Darcy Tucker was the favorite player of most Leaf fans went, like in the early 2000s when they're in the Battle of Ontario. Like Darcy Tucker, that's ham and eggs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's he wears his heart in his sleeves or whatever. He's not the reason they're gonna win or lose. Marner and guys of that ilk might not have that heart and soul thing, but he has an undeniable talent. And no matter how many times you say it to me, you can't justify to me letting him go for what we got, listen to me now, I'm a Leaf fan, what the Leafs got. Listen, there's obviously something, I don't want to say chemistry, Rob, but the team is obviously lacking. You and I both think it's the third and fourth lines. If they'd scored the odd goal, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But
100%.
I'm always interested to hear how certain fan bases fall in love with certain guys. I don't know if you know how
Yep.
much baseball stuff that you watch, but
Yep.
do you remember when the Jays, about 10 years ago, when they were on a roll and they had, what's his name, that Japanese guy? I can't think of his name. Is it Kawasaki?
Kawasaki, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
Sure. Yes.
Everybody loved that guy. He was terrible.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
he was the 24th guy on, and people hung on every word he said and whatever happened. You know what?
Yeah.
I think that's fandom. You pick your
Yes.
favorites and you go from there. Listen, I hope the Leafs do well, but I am skeptical as to whether a team that loses, let's say, well, you know what? I'll give it a wide berth. I'll say he's a top 20 player in the league, right?
No.
I'll say Marner's
Yep.
top 20. I think he's a little higher, but there you go. If you subtract the top 20 player and you weren't good enough to beat those guys, I don't think you're going to find 3 top 70 players to equal one top 20 guy. You know what I mean? But I guess they're hoping that Easton Cowan will be the, I don't know, Logan Stankhoven of Toronto or something. But, we'll see what happens there. So tell me, your career, it's gone well. Really, everyone wants to go better though. What's your ultimate goal? Where would you like to end up?
Well, I'm really happy with where I'm at, and I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And it's pretty interesting
awesome.
because, and it's interesting because, I've worked jobs where I'm like, I really enjoy this, right? Even the photography thing, like I was saying before, and, doing videos and all that stuff. I'm like, I enjoy this a lot, but I don't know if I could do this for the rest of my life. But what I'm doing now, I could, and giving that analysis. And we're building the platform to a point that, I think I probably could do this for the rest of my life. So ultimately, if you asked me 5 years ago, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 7 years? I would be like, I don't know, maybe TSN or Sportsnet. That would be awesome. That would be the ultimate goal, right? But I think we're at a point with a lot of different media right now that didn't really exist 5 years ago, and a lot of people are, doing their own thing and making a living from it. So I could see myself doing what I'm doing right now. It wasn't always this way, and it didn't always go this well, but I'm really happy and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I have and that it is going the way that it's going. So it's been a lot of fun, but yeah, I could see myself doing it for the rest of my life. I absolutely love talking about sports, and building up the company to the point that it is, and talking about different sports, managing people, stuff like that. I'm always learning, right? I'm still relatively a young guy, but trying to perfect my skills in that way and continue to grow.
Well, that's amazing because that gives me pause, because I know that a lot of people, I'm doing this because I want to be on a big network, or I want to work for ESPN or something like this, because when I was growing up, I had a guy I went to university with, Mark Jones, basketball guy, basketball player at York, became the voice of college basketball at ESPN, and he started out at TSN, did all these kind of things, and that was always the pathway. It was always, I'm going to get on this TV station, go from there. But you've done that TV thing, and now you found that this platform is where you're comfortable. So I guess obviously you believe that this is there's legs in this industry. There's longevity here.
Yeah, definitely. I do believe that 100%. I think, to go back to your original point too, I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of people chase money in their career too, right? Like there's no surprise there. But to me, it's always been like purpose and what I feel like I want to do, right? And just because I'm not, I can make more money doing something else, I'd rather do something that I actually like and I have purpose doing that, right? So that's a big thing to me. But yeah, I think just finding purpose in my work, that's the biggest thing. And yeah, I do believe in what we have going on at Digest
the
Media,
platform,
right? Like
the platform, like
100%. How much we've grown in the last 2 years since I started. We've gone from 5 channels to 70 channels. Like the growth has been unbelievable. Rapid expansion to the United States because we are based out of Newfoundland, Canada, and Canada as a whole. But no, truly believe in it. I think I could do it for the rest of my life. I think one thing I'm really excited about and passionate about is because where I started and how I got my experience is gone now. So people who are, 16 and 17 now are not able to get that experience. They might just have to jump right into school. They can't get that volunteer experience. But what I think we're doing a really good job of is giving people with entry level experience who want to just get into content creation, that have that passion, we're giving them that platform, right? We have the strategy in place and we're giving them the platform to then become those content creators. So that's one thing I'm actually really, really happy that we're doing, because, I believe strongly in that, and having to, get some experience. And I was fortunate to get that as a volunteer in the position at Rogers TV with some of those big names, but that doesn't exist anymore. So how are these people that are that age now getting that experience? And I feel like we're, offering that.
Well, that's, you know what, that's great. So tell me, who's going to win the cup? It's not going to be Florida.
It's not going to be Florida. No,
Too much hockey in the last 3 years for those guys.
That's right. And too much hockey, I think, for, the jersey that you're wearing, the Edmonton Oilers. But I do think that they could probably get back. And if they get back against another team, a different team, I think that they will win it. I feel like it's just their kryptonite, the Florida Panthers. They're built different. They're a great team.
I think Edmonton's turned it over enough too. They got. I think they've turned over the roster enough. Anyway, yeah, this jersey. I got a cousin who played there, and I think he played in this vintage. So you can look it up. Anyway, so you think Oilers can win the cup? How are the Leafs going to do?
I think the Leafs will be better this year. And you were just talking a few minutes ago about, are they going to be better without Mitch Marner? And personally, I do believe so when it matters. They might take a step back in the regular season and might score less goals. Those are all true. Like a lot of people saying like, they're not going to score as much without Mitch Marner. You're not wrong, right? You are right. That's a thing that's going to happen, right? He put up a lot of points, but they're going to be a better team when it matters. And Florida, when they played Florida in the playoffs, the top two lines didn't even do anything. Barkov kind of went away. Matthew Tkachuk went away. He didn't do anything in that series. It was the bottom six of that team that carried them to a victory. The Leafs bottom six couldn't do that because of the salary cap structure. I think that their bottom six now can do that. So I think they're actually going to be a better team. Florida, they're missing Barkov for the whole year. They have some other injuries. I don't think, they've played a lot of hockey. I think the Leafs can finally get over that hump. Will they win the cup? I mean, I think they're gaining valuable experience every time they lose, as much as people joke about it. I think at some point you have to break through, same with Edmonton and McDavid. But, if they were to make the Stanley Cup final, let's say out of the East, because if they got past Florida, I feel like they would have had a good chance last year. If it's the Oilers waiting for them, I'm taking the Oilers because they'd have that experience. They've been there for the last couple of years. So for my money this year, if they can stay healthy and they're driven and the young guys can contribute, I think that the Oilers can actually win the Stanley Cup, because I feel like they won't be seeing the Panthers.
I feel the Oilers are probably odds-on favorites to at least get there. As far as the East is a mess. I think everyone, it's kind of like the American League East in baseball this year, it looks like to me. Everyone's kind of coalesced into good teams, no longer any great teams. I think, even with it before the Barkov injury, I didn't think that Florida would be able to repeat just because they went to the finals 3 years in a row. And we know from the way sports are now and the pace they're played, it's not like when the Oilers were, in their heyday, or back with the Islanders where, it wasn't, they were still out drinking during training camp back then, right? I mean, so it's a different level of stress on the body. So it'll be interesting to see how it all turns out. Anyway, Darius, thank you for this. It's great speaking with you. I would love to have you on again. We'll be following you, making sure you're giving good advice to those people who want to find out about the Leafs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to continue to try and give sound analysis. That's the goal, right? But no, this was a pleasure, Keith. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll absolutely come on again. Always love to talk about the Leafs.